Welcome to an inspirational people interview on the Share Life podcast. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and today I'm here with Beth Haun. Beth, say hello.
Hi, guys.
Beth has quite a story, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. Both Beth and I have been through the hills and valleys together. She's been a vital part of my own story. Originally a client of Noodlehead Marketing, who became a team member. She ended up through an interesting process, becoming one of the team members and a leader in Noodlehead Marketing, and a huge part of it. She's a participant in our transition from chaos to order, from unintentionality to intentionality. We both discovered constructive development theory together through the Leaders Lyceum. She went through the program as did I, although at different times. We also explored the Win Without Pitching system by Blair Enns that was transformative in just how we thought about selling and persuasion and facilitation. We both went through the Island Story adventure together, and she's also a co-creator of IDEMA, which you've heard me talk about, and which is a framework for sustaining and capturing and sustaining ideas. So I'm very grateful for the impact that Beth has had. Thank you very much for all that you've given me in your life. And I'm looking forward to you sharing that life with others today. So tell us about you and your story.
Thanks, Jason. I have also been tremendously impacted by you and by my time at Noodlehead. It was as a leap of faith coming over to that team, and it felt like it was exactly where I was supposed to be, and it still feels like that.
It's crazy that it's been 10 years.
I know.
Because
I feel
it felt like so much happened in such a short amount of time, you know?
just a short amount of time. We changed everything about how we showed such bravery in
Yeah.
shifting that business to something meaningful. And, that Sabbath year in particular, I share that every now and again with people. It's kind of a weird thing to share. Like, people are like, wait, you did what?
Yeah. It's funny. I actually, I ended up meeting two people. They reached out to me, and one was about to start a Sabbath year and the other was in the middle of it.
Oh,
And
I
it was
love
just unrelated, and they just happened to stumble upon my
it.
story. And so I checked in with them every few months. How's it going? What do you do? You know, it's
Yeah.
just a cool little thing
Yeah.
to experience. I'm just watching it from the other side of it this time, you know.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people go through that. Maybe it's not, they don't call it that, but I think it's more common than we might think.
Yeah, it might be. I think too, I think about where my view was on it then versus where my view is on it now. We were very much giving things over to God, and at the same time, I certainly had these kind of cherished hopes for outcomes, right? Like, I wanted so much to prove to the world that you didn't have
Mm,
to do it by worldly terms to get the success, if you will, right?
mm,
And I think that probably one of my dreams for it would be that, we take this rest, and yet there's, abundance. And while I'm not sure I saw it as abundance in the moment. I saw it as provision, most certainly. I still remember that story of Len getting the bag of fish. Do you remember that?
I don't remember the fish story. Which one was
Yeah,
that?
his neighbor brought a bag of frozen fish over. Like, he'd helped him
Oh.
with some chores, and he brought all this fish. And
Yeah.
he's like, now
Well,
I
there
got
was
all
so
this
many
food.
stories. It's I
So
forgot half of
many.
them. I'm glad we at
Yeah,
least wrote some of them
yeah,
down.
yeah. And then, if I, when I look at it now, I mean, I have to acknowledge, like, right before I came on with Noodlehead, I had my first miscarriage. And then the next two were while I was at Noodlehead. And that Sabbath year was when I had the third one, and I remember feeling very clearly God was calling me to slow down and
Mm,
to rest. And I remember after having the miscarriage, being very clear that nothing had changed in that, right? Like, that I was still being called to rest, and we rested that year, and that's the year that David was conceived,
mm-hmm.
and it was a successful birth after 3 losses. So to me, like, the abundance of that child coming into this world. Like,
Yeah.
screw dollars and cents, like
What
that was
matters most.
beautiful. Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little Sabbath baby.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing, where God meets us all where we are, and gives us, it's different for everyone, right?
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
So how did you get to Noodlehead? What was the pre-story?
Yeah, so I grew up a person who performed for anyone who would give me love. And so I made good grades and I did good things, and then I rebelled and
How
did
much
some
of
of
that you
that.
was personality versus other factors?
Oh, I think it all probably went back to this like looking for love thing, right? Like I was looking for love and acceptance from my peers, and I thought that acting a certain way, doing certain things, being involved in certain activities and nonsense was going to get me there. And it was probably some escapism too, right? And then I went to college and like got through by the skin of my teeth. I mean, I went to a fantastic school. Like I'd had all sorts of like accomplishments, right? Like I was salutatorian at my high school. Like people, had compliments for me and showered affection on me based on the things I did.
Like
The
achievements and yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because, another thing that really impacted me about my Noodlehead time, and I'm pretty sure we did this while we were at Noodlehead, was the Strengths Finder
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And my mother, one of her top 5 strengths is achiever. She's an achiever, and
Oh.
like so this box checking, while it's not one of my strengths,
Yeah.
it was how I pleased my mother.
Yeah. Well, that's funny because Kate, her strengths finders was like a combination of both of my parents.
Oh yeah, we marry the familiar sometimes, don't we? So yeah, so I went to Vandy and loved it. Partied more than I would if I had the chance to do it over again now, and that's okay. It's just where I was at that time. And then after, I guess the summer before my senior year, I worked abroad um, and got the bug. And so after I graduated, I worked abroad again, and that's where I met my first husband. Ended up moving to South Africa with him for a while. Got married there,
What
came
what
back
how
here.
long how long were you in South Africa?
I lived in South Africa for about between a year and a half and 2 years. So it really wasn't that long,
What was it
but
like
very
to live there?
impactful. Oh, that was interesting. I felt like a lot of the culture felt more familiar to me than European culture,
Hmm.
and yet it was pretty disconcerting to walk into a shopping mall and see automatic, weapons on the security guards and all these beautiful homes, but there were tall walls and barbed wire on top,
Hmm.
and there's certainly the race relations were a thing too, right? Like I mean, not only am I now living in a country where I am a minority race, but that minority race had a tradition of subjugating
Yeah.
everyone else, and a lot of the attitudes were negative towards Black people, other people. It was kind of a mixed bag, but I remember, I definitely remember at one point, I had several arguments with people who would say things like, Black people are just X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, but that's not true because I've experienced it otherwise, right? Like that,
Yeah.
no, of course they can learn. Like I've seen highly intelligent people. Like
Yeah.
just what you're telling me isn't adding up, you know?
Yeah. I had a recent
Um,
interview with it hasn't been published yet, but it'll come out soon, with Daryl Davis, and he's a black
okay.
man, and he would reach out to the people in the KKK, go to their rallies. And he
Wow.
talks about that similar type of conversation, but he's the black guy, and he's like, "No, I don't believe that," or he
Yeah.
would dismiss their assumptions, or break them down.
Yeah.
But he did it in such a loving way that he's been able to liberate so many people from the Klan. It's just amazing and
Such
inspiring.
bravery. Such
And
bravery.
I'm thinking, man, if I were a black man, I would not want to go to a KKK rally. That's terrifying. But it inspires me to
Right.
go,
Sounds
maybe I
scary.
can speak out in the ways that are terrifying to me,
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to listen to that one. I really
Yeah.
like that.
Anyways, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupt.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Uh, yeah, South Africa was good. I learned Afrikaans. I've always enjoyed living in other places. I think it was really impactful to me just to understand that there wasn't just the American way of doing things, and that we weren't always right about everything, right? And it's all subjective. Like,
Yeah.
what's right for me might not be right for you. Um, but it's kind of like the Noodlehead thing, right? Like, it was such a short amount of time in the scope of my life, and yet it was very impactful. And I went back and visited many times, and that's what led me to Noodlehead. If I don't know if you remember, but it was right after a visit to South Africa to see our family there, and I was like, I can't keep doing this, like, you
Mm,
only get certain number of days to go somewhere. Like, this is nonsense. We live in a world where we have the internet and we have
hmm
connectivity, and like, I want to be able to work from wherever I want to be. And
And wasn't your
that
purpose statement something along the lines of like each living as if each day is my last, or something like that?
no, well, no, that wasn't it. My vision
Oh,
is
okay.
for geographic independence. It still is. My purpose is to grow to the glory of God.
Okay.
And it's funny, none of this stuff has changed. I think,
Yeah.
like, some of my visions have, like, the only vision I can remember changing was my vision for my parenting. At some point
Mm,
I went from, I want to raise kind children, to, I want to raise self-aware souls. And
mm.
part of
But it
that
was
was an
just
understanding.
but was it a shift in understanding or just shift in vocabulary?
No, it was very much a shift in
Oh,
understanding, because
okay.
I came to understand that just because someone's kind doesn't mean that they're emotionally healthy or doing right by
Oh,
them, right? Like, because people pleasing, like, I'm really kind, like, but I can do it for the wrong reasons. Anyone can do it for the wrong
mm,
reasons. It goes back to
yeah.
a question of
That's interesting
motivation.
because, well, when we my mission statement before was to teach others, and then I realized I wanted it to be mutual.
Ah, I
So
like
I,
that.
so I changed
Yeah.
it to Share Life, which is
Look
the name of
at
the
you growing into
podcast.
humility.
And because I have something to learn, right? Even if it's a
Right.
child, they have way more to teach me than I might even have to teach
Yes.
them. So,
Yeah, and if we keep an open mind, we can
hmm
listen and learn from just about anyone.
yeah. So anyway, go on.
Yeah, where were we then? So,
So South Africa, then
South
kind of
Africa. Okay.
Noodlehead, or
Well, so
visiting.
first it was Builder Specialties, right? So we moved back, and I started working at Builder Specialties. I started, right when, I mean, it was like within the first 6 months of the company starting, and
What year did
I
it start then?
let's see, that would have been in like 2004. 2003,
Okay.
2004 would have been when they started, but I got there in 2004. And it was such a wonderful opportunity being in a startup like that. Like, I really got to have my fingers in all sorts of pies. I mean, like, I got to build out a showroom, an appliance showroom, and
Which one
I
was it that you
it
did?
was the one in Kennesaw, the very first
Okay.
showroom they had,
Yeah.
and which isn't even there anymore, you know.
Yeah.
And I did some operations work. Like, I routed the appliance deliveries and managed the appliance the delivery drivers, and then, like, the sales team at one point, before we had the showroom, they were like, we don't have a way to sell these things to our people. We need to be able to show them the packages. And I'm like, well, I can put together a PowerPoint presentation. And so I kind of fell into marketing. I mean, that
You're
was
like, hey, you're
never,
the marketing person now.
that's exactly what happened. That's 100% what happened. They're like, you there. And I'll never forget Dave Hudson getting me my first business cards and showing them to me and saying, you see how there's no title on there? That's because we don't want to limit what we can ask you to do. And
That's, that must have been
I
so
was
diff.
highly,
That must have been so different in terms of how big it got when you started to when you were done with it.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and it grew basically to the size of what RCS had been. And I had worked at RCS as a
Oh,
teenager.
okay. Oh, okay.
So it was not my first rodeo in the industry. As my dad had been in the industry for years, and I liked working for my dad. I worked for him as a teenager, and he really instilled a strong work ethic in me.
Yeah.
And I really admired him as a boss and as a leader. I heard so many people would come to me and tell me their personal stories about the chances he had given him or
Hmm.
he'd given them. You know, like he'd really impacted a lot of people's
Hmm.
lives in meaningful ways. And he was, you know, he's a really smart guy. You know that. I mean,
Yeah.
intelligent, can definitely carry a conversation with you on stuff like
Yeah.
challenges you're thinking. Um, and he definitely didn't coddle me. There was no like, well, she's my daughter, so she gets. In fact, I probably got the short end of the stick. In
Yeah.
fact, pretty sure he told my mother early on that he paid me less than he would have paid someone else
Oh, wow.
because he didn't want, you know, for me to be spoiled or anything. And he made it very clear when I started that job, I was to arrive half an hour early and I was to leave half an hour late.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was to be how I did things. And then that's how I did things 100%. Like I was a workaholic. I was like
Mm.
him. I derived so much value. Like I valued myself based on the work, my work performance. Yeah.
Now, do you think that's unusual for women, or is that pretty common?
I don't know. I think it's probably pretty common for everybody. Like, so here's what I learned after Noodlehead, right? Like that Noodlehead was such a beautiful community and such a special space. And it was the greatest professional heartbreak of my life to be released from that company. It was also exactly what needed to happen, right?
Yeah.
Um, but what I learned afterwards was the first thing people ask you when they meet you is, "What do you do?"
Hmm.
That's always what they asked. And you know, I'd gone from like working so hard at Builder Specialties and kind of, you know, I'd moved up to manager of customer service and then I was this and then, you know, when you hired me, I got the VP in front of a name, right? And I'm the VP of operations. It doesn't matter that there's like half a dozen of us here. Like but it was a title, you know, and it felt so important and meaningful. And
Mm.
then I didn't know how to answer when people asked me what I did. And I'm kind of tearing up a little bit thinking about it because I'm still like, it has taken me so long I'm still wrestling with being okay and loving myself exactly where I am, regardless of how I'm performing or what title I'm given or anything like that. But that question, what do you do? And you know, now, and so I wouldn't know how to answer, and I had not chosen to be a stay-at-home mom, and so it didn't feel like something I could easily embrace, even though I knew like everything in both kids' lives, like everything I needed to be there. Like my presence
Mm.
in the home the last 10 years has been vital for the development of these kids. I'm not saying it has to be a mom. I'm just saying for my family, for what we were going through, my presence was important. And it wasn't something I sought though, right? And so it was just torture when people would ask me what I did.
But
And
just your whole life, or in that window of time?
no, after Noodlehead, I
Yeah.
didn't care. I loved it when people asked me what I did before that.
Oh, okay.
I had an answer, Jason.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, that
Yeah.
helps contextual.
Yeah, like
Okay.
somebody asks you, what do you do? Oh, I'm VP of operations for a digital marketing company. Like, aren't I fancy? Like,
But now you're a stay-at-home mom, and so you feel like there's no
yeah, and I didn't even
weight
claim
to
that
it.
title. I wouldn't have
Okay.
claimed that title. So it would be, you know, for a long time, I dance around. Well, I just published my book and I do some contract work and you know, I'm just kind of like, I'm reaching for anything I can grab, right?
Is
And
it
like,
almost like covering a vulnerability?
probably, yeah, I'm sure it was because I didn't see my value if I couldn't like attach a title or an achievement or whatever to it, right? Like it was so
Yeah.
important. And the crazy thing is like now, like I don't hate that question now because I struggle to answer it. I hate that question now because it's stupid. And because
Yeah.
I don't care how you make money. And like there are so many better questions to ask somebody if you want to get to know their character. Like my go-to question now is what brings you joy these days? I'd rather hear about that, you know?
Yeah.
And you can see sometimes like if you ask somebody who doesn't like what they do for a living, you ask them what they do, like it's like you're putting a 50-pound weight on their shoulders. Like,
Yeah.
they'll answer you. They know their answer. Doesn't mean it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's interesting because I have a similar dynamic because I published 2 books, Path of the Freelancer, which is about freelancing, and The Jump, which is kind of some of my story and about just the lessons I learned from Noodlehead.
mm,
But my goal was not to sell like a billion books. Like for Path of the
yeah,
Freelancer, I wanted to publish my first book. That was my goal.
right,
So
right,
I have that same type of conversation with people
yeah,
because it's like, okay, I feel like I have to explain why this means something to me, and it
yeah.
makes it this, which I think is a nice thing to have, nice conversation to have. But if they're just looking for that kind of superficial thing, then I'm not gonna be able to give them that. So
Well, and I think most people don't even know what they're looking for when they ask the question, right? It's just reflexive.
yeah,
Hi, nice to meet you. What do you do?
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
That's
It's
how we.
kind of
That's how
like
we.
for the most part, I stopped asking people, how are you doing? And I said it, I say what I want to say, which is, hey, it's nice to see you again. Or, hey, goodbye.
Yeah,
Like if I want to ask you a question, I'll actually ask it. Right.
yeah, yeah.
So that it's a similar type of thing. It's like, yeah, that was a
Well,
reflexive question I was asking. I didn't actually care how you were doing.
and that tracks with our shift to intentionality,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because the words that come out of our mouth are more impactful than we may realize.
Yeah.
I mean, you may be reflexively asking me, what do I do? And it's meanwhile, it's very impactful to me, much more impactful than you probably didn't even have any intention behind it at all. Like, it's just, yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny.
So does some of that come from the source of maybe the sort, I don't know the best way to phrase it, the source of value? So the people you were looking to for affirmation or attention, they valued work, or do you think it was something else?
Probably, I mean, both my parents valued work. And for the first 5 to 6 years after Noodlehead, just about every time I got together with my mom, her first question was, what are you doing about finding a job?
Mm-hmm.
And it stemmed from her experience, which was she gets
Oh, yeah, yeah. You cut out for a second, but you're back.
I had a call coming in.
Oh.
She gets tremendous gratification from working outside of the home, right? And she didn't get that in the home, and so she assumed that I wasn't getting the good stuff if I wasn't doing work. But every time she
Mm.
asked me, it just made me feel like worse and worse and worse. Worse.
So if a
Um,
parent is in that place, what would you encourage them to do instead?
I'm a firm believer in reparenting ourselves. There's a lot of different like tactics for doing that. But like I have my own set of values, she has her own set of values. They're separate and equal, right? But if I want to live a life that's gratifying to me, then I need to live in accordance with my values. And so yeah, I can sit down, in particular, like a writing exercise is the first thing that comes to my mind. Like you can I can sit there and write a letter to myself. Dear Beth, I see what a challenge it is for you when someone asks you that question. I understand why it's a challenge for you. It makes sense because, this has been your history. This has been your experience. You've gotten a lot of confidence from your accomplishments and your achievements, your titles, and it has served you in the past. And now it's not serving you. And there are different ways to approach this that might serve you better. And you can try some things and see how it works and be curious. And if it doesn't work, you can change your mind.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of taking yourself. I think about little Beth sometimes, right? Because there's little
Yeah.
Beth. There's like, for me, she's this girl with this little perm. She's like 6 or 7 years old. And sometimes I just need to talk to her because sometimes she's afraid. Sometimes she's anxious about how
Yeah.
she's being received. Sometimes I don't even need to talk to her. Sometimes I just need to picture like pressing my third eye to hers and just breathing deeply.
Yeah. So you talk
But
about the idea of we do some we come up with those values and behaviors. They serve us for a while, maybe to survive, but then we hit a point where they no longer serve us.
Yes.
And that seems to be a very difficult transition, both for individuals, groups, and our society, it seems like, where, hey, this thing served us for a while, but it no longer does.
Yeah. Change is scary.
But it's
Even for
also
people.
the change that, like, this actually protected me for a while, that, right?
Well, yeah, I think that part, I think seeing that it protected me for a while is part of what allows me to let go of it. Like
Mm,
awareness, then acceptance, and then action. If you try to jump to action before you have awareness or acceptance, it usually doesn't play out so well.
yeah.
Um, so acknowledging that it has, and the other thing too, the other thing about that is like I've come to believe that most of my character is neither good nor bad. Like it all sits kind of on a spectrum. So like you look at my strengths, I'm a strong communicator on the strength side, and on the weakness side, if you want to call it that. Sometimes I talk too much, right?
Yeah.
I'm Intimacy is a strength of mine. The ability to go deep in a conversation with someone very quickly, and I have at times been less than discerning and who I've been
Mm,
willing to share intimate parts of myself with, right? Like whether that's physically, emotionally, intellectually, what have you. Like, and I just don't have to share every piece of myself with everyone. I just don't. I'm
yeah.
not under any obligation to, to reveal everything to everyone.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, anything else post Noodlehead in your story that you want to share, about your, maybe
Yeah,
your health and wellness and the
yeah. So
the
I
beach party?
and the beach party. Yeah, so a few years after Noodlehead, I was introduced to a support group that was tremendously helpful for me. And I found a lot of support and understanding in this community. And it really led me down this path of self care that I had just hadn't seen I needed to
How do
be
you
on.
define that? Because that gets
Yeah.
tossed around so many different ways.
Yeah. So I, through this support group, have my idea of what self care looks like has totally changed. So I look at several different departments. I actually have, like, in my daily planner journal, I have a departmental check in, and one of the things I check in on my financial self care, my spiritual self care, my emotional self care, my physical self care. My intellectual self care, my social self care. All these things are pieces, and there's more there. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. But it's there's so much more to it, and like financial self care, like that was a really important thing for me to start putting that in the self care bucket, because like I think before I had this kind of idea that, like, you get to, once you have a certain number of dollars coming into your bank account or in your bank account or whatever, now we're good, right? Well, what I've learned in the last 6-7 years is that my uh, peace of mind around my financial status doesn't actually have to do with the number of dollars in my bank account. What it has to do with for me is my awareness and acceptance of where I am. So if I am willing to take the time to track all my spending, put it all into categories, do the little pie charts. Food spending in particular has been a journey of mine for the last couple of years, because that's the low hanging fruit on my budget. Is like, if I really am intentional about what I'm spending on groceries and things like that, I can really make an impact. But if I know what I'm spending and on what, that is what makes a difference in my peace of mind around money,
Mm.
not whether or not I have enough to do X, Y, or
Is it
Z.
so
So it's like,
visibility? Would you call that visibility over your money
I think it's kind
or
of, it's
clarity?
taking control of what I can control,
Yeah.
right? Like, so I mean, I can control whether or not I'm tracking these things. I can control
Mm,
whether or not I'm looking at these things. And I notice it with my husband. If he starts questioning me on a purchase, if I haven't been doing my financial self care, I am very quick to become defensive,
mm,
because I don't really know if it's a justified purchase or whatever, right? Like
Mm.
I start to jade, justify, argue, defend, and explain.
Mm.
I want to do all these things to make it all right. Um, but if I have done the work and I've looked at the things, and for me, for my relationship, part of financial self-care is actually reviewing these things with him. Like, again, it doesn't matter if we have enough for X, Y, or Z, or if we've, got
Yeah.
X margin or whatever. It's, have we sat down and looked at it and said, yeah, we're doing what we can here, or here are our opportunities for improvement. It just changes everything.
Yeah.
Um, so I try to look at self-care from a much more holistic perspective than I used to.
Mm.
Um, and it's not like, I try to stay away from any moral judgments on like nutrition or movement. Like, I am not a better or worse person because I, pump some iron one day or eat a carrot. Like, and I'm not, the same goes for eating a piece of cake or sitting on the couch, watching Netflix. But at the same time, like, if I'm pouring into to myself with some of these activities, if I'm doing it because I love how it makes me feel, and I like, the strength, I like the endurance that comes from it. I love feeling like I want to play with my kids more. Like, that was one of the first things I noticed when I started like working out, was like, I wanted to play. My kids would ask me to do something. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go jump on the trampoline. Let's do this stuff, right? Because I was no longer just sitting around, right?
Yeah.
And for nutrition too. Like, I really I strive to put things in my body that make my body feel alive and good. Like,
Mm.
and if I have a breadstick at Olive Garden, like, we don't need to be lashing ourselves over this. Like, it's okay. And yeah, maybe it upset my stomach. Maybe I just needed to have that little reminder that my stomach doesn't sit as well when I eat these things as it does other things. Just move on. Tomorrow's a new
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I
Yeah.
found
Yeah.
the
Go on.
support
Yeah.
group, and one of the questions it asked was, am I taking good care of myself?
Mm.
And then a sorority sister invited me to then the company was called Beachbody Boot Camp, and I accepted. I started working out. And for 4 years, I was a customer and really didn't lose any weight. I hadn't done anything with the nutrition, but I felt so much better that I was just like addicted. And
Yeah.
then in 2020, my husband and I, 2020, right? Like, it was just that year. And like, the kids would go
Mm.
to their dads for a weekend, and we'd be drinking skinny margaritas and eating cheese dip and a steak. And it just really started packing on. And I ended up, but I was still working out, and I saw this commercial, and someone I knew from Builder Specialties,
Oh
Elsie's
wow.
daughter,
Oh
actually,
wow.
was a beach body coach, and she was on this commercial after my workout, and I reached out to her. I was like, "Did I just see you on a commercial?" She's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, my coach quit years ago. I think maybe I need to transfer to your team." And I transferred to her team, and it was a thriving team in this community. Like, I learned that I could, if I surrounded myself with other people trying to take better care of themselves, I could learn from what they were doing, right? And like, all of a sudden, I was like, "Oh, I like that idea. I like that idea. I like that idea." And I started picking up what I liked and using it, and it worked. And I started feeling better and better and better. And then I was really hooked, and I decided I wanted to start helping other people, and so I did. And it's been incredible. Like, I so much of our company's now called Body.
Okay.
They've made a shift. They've started selling corporately what I've been selling all along, which is health esteem. I mean, I've never been selling weight loss. That's not what it's not what it's about for me. It's about feeling good right where you are today. And
That's
when
interesting
I
because
built this,
well, I was gonna say I went to this CrossFit thing event with some friends, and there was two guys there, and one of the guys, and I was like, obviously I had not been doing it, so I was like a disaster, like falling behind and like
yeah,
wheezing and aching and the cramps. I was just like a disaster. And there was one guy there that like it wasn't trying to do it, but just the way he was talking to me just made me feel horrible about myself. And there was another guy that the way he was talking to me, I felt wonderful. Like he was
yeah,
reassuring me and, like you don't have to keep up
yes,
with them, that kind of, and it was
yeah.
a stark contrast. And it was much more motivating, even though they were kind of doing the same thing. They were just approaching it vastly different.
Yeah. It makes a big difference. And that's like why I say, like, I am not punishing my body. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not, I am learning to work with my body instead of
Mm.
against it. And that for me is gorgeous. And when I think about it, Jason, like, I really, when you boil it down, like, I can make a strong argument that the only innate responsibility that comes with life is taking care of the body we're given.
Okay.
I mean, like, at the end of the day, what else? Like, what else is there? Like, you're given a body. Like, and
Stewardship of
it's
it.
a body. Yeah, do what you will with it, right? Like, that's really your only responsibility that you're not putting on yourself or someone
Mm.
else and putting on for you. But but the cool thing was, like, the cool thing about these businesses is, you can buy into the way everybody else is doing it. I could have done boot camps and this and that, but I did it the way that I wanted to do it. And after all that time at Noodlehead, there was no way I was going to build a business that wasn't intentional. And so, like, my social media schedule, like, each day of my week is it has a theme and it's meaningful. It's not like, like Taco Tuesday. I'm not saying Taco Tuesday is bad, right? But I put things that were meaningful to me, like, I have Mindful Monday because
Mm.
mindfulness is important to me. Tuning Tuesday because I believe what the inputs we have in our life are important. We Wednesday because I think community is important. Thankful Thursday because gratitude's important. Fun and Free Friday because I think it's important to do fun things free of attachment. Self-care Saturday because I think self-care is important, and stock taking Sunday because I think it's important to look at my life and my week and ask myself questions about whether or not this is the way I want to continue. And then I created these regular self-care events. I decided I didn't want to recreate the wheel I didn't want to always be looking for the next thing to tell people all about what I'm doing, right? So instead, I have 2 monthly events. I have the first weekend of every month is Water Weekend, where we set a water goal. Everybody sets their own, and you try to hit it. That's it. And then the third Sunday of every month is Clean Week, and that is my favorite. That's a self-care practice of your choice. And so we've got this group who comes together and everybody's working on something different. I mean, one person might be working on more conscious contact with God. One person might be working on cutting out sugar or caffeine or getting more movement. Another person might be working on self-talk. Another person might be working on their posture or their enunciation. And it's so cool because all these people bring these different ideas of what self-care can look like to the group, and it inspires others, right? You're like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. I could totally do that. And then after a year of showing up daily on social media, I decided I can't preach self-care and show up daily on social media. This is not good for me. And so I started taking social media breaks during my clean weeks. And in the last maybe 6 months or so, I've extended that to more of a media break because I found that what was happening was, when I would take my social media breaks, I wouldn't go into the social media apps, but I would kind of establish a different pattern. So, like, if my pattern when I'm on social media is like check Facebook, check Instagram, check my emails, check, this, then when I was on my break, it would be go look at the news, go look at my
Mm.
emails, go, right? And I'm like, how many times do I need to look at this news app? Like, how many times do I need to check my email? Like, I don't, right? But it was like, it's this compulsion. And these phones, we get the hit, right? We get the dopamine hit every time
Yeah.
that something pops up, whatever. And it's been very important to me to learn how to put my phone in the drawer. And it
Yeah.
is a challenge. It
Yeah.
is a challenge. I've been doing the social media breaks for almost 2 years now, and it
Hmm.
is a challenge every month.
Is it just Facebook or is it other ones as well?
Oh yeah, no, all of them. I mean, Instagram,
Yeah.
Facebook, and for me, I do some of the scrolling, but I really want the notifications,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
I want
okay.
I
Yeah.
want somebody to like my stuff. I want somebody to comment on my stuff.
Mm.
Uh, that's what the
Yeah.
whole thing's set up for, right? Like,
Yeah.
we are the whole construct of it is come offer your opinion on someone else's business.
Yeah, I was tracking my sleep in 2020 and I would so before the pandemic hit, like I had all those rituals types of things you described. Like everything was perfect. And then the pandemic hit and it was like
Hmm.
it threw me off and I wasn't able to recover quickly, but um, I tracked my sleep, and you tracks the quality of it, and you could
Yeah.
see particularly during November, like my sleep just like dropped in
Oh
quality.
gosh, yeah. November 2020, no doubt.
And then it was like November, December, and then January, and then it was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. So I had to take
Yeah.
a Twitter break from that for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a thing, and I don't know how many of us realize how much it's affecting us. I'm just not sure. I
Well, see,
forget,
that's
right?
yeah, well, that's the thing, and we did I Run You Run, and one of the things about I Run You Run was you tracked it, so you could see it
Yeah,
quickly, and that was the kind of thing with the sleep tracking, is I was tracking it so I could see it. But
yeah,
most people are not necessarily doing that, or they're not as analytical as me to even
right.
kind of bridge the connection. So I think what you're describing in that, like talking about just tracking things, how much that one, it gives us control and visibility, but it also just looks like a mirror, right?
Oh, absolutely. I shared about those departmental check-ins. Like sometimes, like for those departments, what I'll do if it's a stock taking Sunday, it gets a frowny face, a straight face, or a smiley face. And if it's a weekday, then like, financial self-care, I might write in the box, okay, do accounting, self-care, whatever, right? But it's funny because when I'm checking into those departments, sometimes I'll like get to emotional and I'll write tired, and then I'll get to physical and I'll write tired, and I'll get to spiritual and write tired, and then when you've written tired 3 times on your thing, you're like, maybe I need a nap.
Time to sleep.
Yeah, and it's just a little thing, and it's so important.
Yeah. Anything else about your story that you want to throw out there? You wrote some devotions for the church.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so actually I did, when you asked me to like tell my story and to talk about like the importance of stories in my life, one of the first things I thought about was one of the meditations I wrote for that. So in 2020, um I the Episcopal Church puts out a monthly like meditation booklet, right? So like you'll have the verse for the day, and then somebody writes a reflection on it. So I've read this like my entire life. I've read for Day by Day, which is the publication for the Episcopal Church. And in 2019, I was invited to be the author for 2020 and for August 2020. And
How did that come about?
so I was part of the online community. Like I had started, I guess it was around 2015, I started reading that online instead of in the little booklet. And they
Hmm.
had a comment section, and there's this community that thrives there and prays for one another and supports one another and loves one another. And they were really there for me in the final days of my first marriage, when
Hmm.
I just so desperately wanted for things to work, right? And it was just soul crushing for me uh, to see where things were going. And I was just 100% there with that community. And one of the editors took note of my presence there, and that's how I was invited. And
Mm.
so it was one of the. I mean, it is probably the one of the greatest honors I've ever had, was writing for that community. It was also one of the most challenging things for me spiritually to go through that editing process, because as you know, some of my ideas are a little less than conventional when it comes to theology. I think I gave them a run for their money on that one. But but one of the things that I wrote, and I had it ready so I could share it with you because it's kind of cool. One of the meditations I wrote, I think, is probably the way I'd most like to share my story. And when I gave it a title when I republished on my website, and when I put it on my website, I called it Parable. So it's from Psalm 78. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will declare the mysteries of ancient times. And here's my reflection on it. A child went to school. In science, she studied the scientific method. She was intrigued. In math, formulas developed her desire for balance. History classes taught her to think critically about information sources and consider motivations. Ideas about perspective emerged from books she read, fueling her belief that we are more alike than different. As she grew, she learned how little she knew. She experienced the weight of facts and wondered at carrying so many. She began to
Yep.
question those who claimed to have all the answers. When things didn't make sense, she turned to God. Guide me, she prayed, and she saw signs. Over and over again, she made decisions difficult to prove by the scientific method. She began to think about concepts of God critically. She began to erase the formulas she had drawn around God, and God grew big enough to swallow up her facts, and that truth set her free.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's kind of how I see my life, right? Like kind of like you were talking about, like I don't know if it was before or after we started recording, but growing into humility, wanting to, just releasing the idea that we have to know things and that we have to have all the answers. Um,
Well, that's
maybe,
one of the takeaways from Job is Job wants all these answers, and God
yeah,
gives him a bunch of questions, but it seems to work, right?
right, right, right. And it's funny
Because
too
he
because I
shows
think
up.
about,
Yeah.
oh, God, and God does, right? Like, and if you're willing to look for it, and it's funny because I think about, like, when I was at Noodlehead was when I was really heavy into the signs. Like I was all about asking for signs. I don't know if you remember, but it was Italia who had suggested to me. I used to say, uh, my feelings on God were a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. And when I
Mm-hmm.
shared that with her, she suggested that I introduce myself to God and ask God by what name I could call him. And I did. I was really into order of prayer at that time. And so there were about 6 months where I had this kind of structured prayer life. And part of that structure was saying, God, you know me. By what name can I call you? And there was one morning, about 6 months into it, I was out by a lake early morning, going through my thing, and I heard a name, but I didn't hear it, and I saw a name, but I didn't see it. Like, and when I shared it with Natalia, I remember her saying, "God wrote on your heart," and that felt right. And there was this name, right? And I Googled it when I got home, and it was a Jewish name for God, and it's one that's very, it's not commonly used, but it was just so random that this name came to me. So like I've had really powerful experiences around asking for signs. Like I asked God at one point, give me a sign if it's important to you that I stay in this marriage, and the sign didn't come. Right. And so, and it's not like I bailed on the marriage right then, but things changed for me at that point because all of a sudden it felt like this is my decision. This is not staying in this marriage is not necessary for honoring God. Right. And the
Have
other,
you ever?
lots of other little things.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Noah?
No.
Okay, that I won't spoil it, but the end of the movie is this sort of like God tell me what to do, and
Yeah.
it's kind of that type of moment.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I was so into those signs for so long and I just don't ask for signs very much anymore. And it's not because my relationship with God is less close. My prayers, I try to stay centered around asking God for understanding of God's will for my life and the power to carry it out. Let's keep it simple, right? Like just show
Yeah,
me what work I can do. I'm about to walk into the grocery store here. Can you just make it really clear what I might do for you in there? That'd be
yeah,
nice.
yeah, yeah. So you've talked a lot about living better and working smarter. Anything you would add to that?
Um, well, I know we're gonna talk about IDEMA another time, but I really this intentional living is such a gift, and having a structure is such a gift. I'm such a free thinking person that I have found that's putting structure around myself is really good for me. Um, and so I think, and the other piece to it is like some of these structures, right? They're applicable anywhere. So the idea that IDEMA, idea, discovery,
Execute.
execution, maintenance, audit, right? Like these are things that we can take anything through. Same with like, awareness, acceptance, action. Like I can ask myself, like, where am I
Hmm.
on this? Am I still needing to accept
Yeah,
this, or am I still not fully aware? Whatever. Like And systems help me too. Like, I mean, like I said, like I don't, report to an office. I don't have like, a schedule for my day, tasks. I mean, I do, right? But it's a lot more loose than it would be if I were like it was when I was working for someone. So my journal, my daily planner is really empowering and helpful for me because it helps me stay close to the things that are important to me. I have my core values on there. I ask myself on a regular basis, am I living into these? Um, my primary purpose is there, my vision is there. And it's really fascinating to me. Like, here we are 10 years down the road, and none of those things have changed, right? Like, they all sit really well with me. And I think taking the time to dive into that and ask myself those questions was just so impactful on my life. Like, and I think it's hard to get the nerve to do it. I'll never forget that first 360 that I did
Yeah.
with Leaders Lyceum. Like, that was the first time that I ever asked people to fill out things with, what do you think about me on these things or whatever. And like, that was scary. It was really
Yeah.
scary. But then once you start to look at it as data, right? Like, it changes. It
Yeah.
changes, and it's the same on a health journey, right? Like, if I'm trying to lose weight to be kinder to my knees, like, I can look at a scale and I can decide that it's shaming or congratulating me, or I can decide it's data. It's just data. It's a
Yeah.
piece of the puzzle. So I think having the courage to dive into some of that stuff and ask yourself the hard questions, I think that's it really can pay off in spades. And I think too that having a person or people who are there to support you through that is really important. You talked some about mentorship and the value of that. I think some of the most impactful mentors I've had in my life have not given me the answers, right? Like, they are the people who have said things like, I really think you have the answer inside yourself. I believe you have this answer, and I think you can do this. And maybe you should explore it this way. But it's never the best mentors I've had have just been role
Hmm.
models, and not guides. So
Yeah.
yeah, finding those people who encourage you to believe in yourself is just so impactful, because the truth of the matter is, what's best for me may not be what's best for you, and what's best for me today might not be what's best for me tomorrow. And having people to remind you that you have more answers for yourself than you might believe is important, especially in a world where everybody else is telling you the answers, right? Like, every commercial that comes up is telling you this is the answer. This is what's going to make you happy. Whether it's, a new digital toy or an education or, a new job, whatever, it doesn't matter. I think self-authoring our lives is the path to self-satisfaction.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who wants to start that journey but doesn't know where to start?
Well, I do think that community is there for the taking, or for the joining, if you will. So I'm amazed how many support groups there are. There's a support group for everything, absolutely everything. So if somebody is in like a situation that is challenging, there's a community for it somewhere. Just get online, man. We've got it all at our fingertips. That's one great way to start. I believe in asking God for help. I think asking for guidance and direction is helpful, right? So that's a way to start. But I don't. I know that doing it alone is not the best way for me, because when I try to do things alone, I get tunnel vision. I
So,
need somebody.
yeah, well, I
Yeah.
was gonna say you're hitting on this idea of dependence, right? We are dependent creatures.
Yeah.
But in America, it's like, hey, I'm autonomous. I don't need anyone else. I did it myself. Don't tell me what to do. So how do you
Yeah.
reconcile that?
How do I reconcile that? Um, I don't know if I have to.
Yeah.
Start there, right? Like, um, for me, it is. I come to better solutions when I involve additional brains, and I don't want the brains who are dictating my life, direction to me. I want people to share their own experiences, and I want to take what I like and leave the rest. And I am so inspired by their people. Look at your podcast. It's called Sharing Life, Inspirational People, right? Like, come on, like, it's because this works. Because something you said in this conversation, or something I said, is going to strike someone in a way that they need to hear, right? And it's probably not like what we thought it would be.
Yeah.
But when we share these things with each other, and we share our own challenges and the ways we've overcome them, other people can get ideas. Like, I just think, and I think the same thing politically. I think that the idea that we've got two teams fighting against each other is absolutely ludicrous. Like, since when is one way of thinking the best way of thinking? Like, I mean, you know, opposing opinions lead to better
Hmm.
solutions if we're willing to listen and learn, and treat each other with dignity and respect.
Yeah,
I just
I
think,
had an emotional vision the other day of just imagining our next president in the Oval Office, and next to him is Bush and Obama and John McCain and John Kerry and Hillary, like even the losers, like everyone in, like, we've got huge, big, complex problems. We can do this together. We can't do this
yeah,
on our own. And just
and
that
we
idea.
probably want the same stuff too, right? Like,
Yeah,
at the end of the day, we might have different ideas tactically about how to approach things.
yeah. And so it's we're destroying each other, which is destroying us, when we could be. And I think part of that is me grieving, like, we don't have that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And I think our country, I read this book called The Grieving Brain, about the neurology of, or I don't know the right word, but just how the brain works when it comes to grieving. And I was like, wait a second. I think our country has a lot of grieving to do that it has not done and it's
oh
causing
yeah,
really severe problems.
oh yeah. We are just burying a lot of that junk, right? A lot of the stuff that we could reparent ourselves through.
Yeah,
We're just
exactly.
pretending it never happened. And
Exactly.
you're right. I mean, like, my 17-year-old loathes our political system. Like,
Yeah,
he's not desensitized to it at all. He's looking at it and saying, "This is madness."
yeah, which it is.
It is, and I
Yeah.
don't know how to fix it. Like, I don't have
Yeah,
the solution. I do think that if we are solution oriented as opposed to like victory oriented, it's bound to work out better.
yeah, yeah, at least it's a start. And I think that's where it kind of gets back to that the idea of dependence and vulnerability, and who's going to be the first. I think it was I can't remember if it was Leaders Lyceum or some other one, but it was like, who's going to be the more mature person? Who's going to be the one? Someone has to go first, and that's
Yeah,
scary to do that, right?
very much so. Not just scary, like, it's a threat to the system at this point,
Yeah,
and a
yeah,
threat to the power structure. So if somebody's trying to subvert the existing power structure, that's terrifying to the
yeah,
existing power
yeah.
structure.
Which reinforces
Whatever side of
the
whatever aisle you're
tribes.
on, right?
Yeah, yeah. So what do you what are some fictional or actual stories that have shaped you as a person? Narrative stories.
Like I said, that support group's been really meaningful to me, and listening to other people share in there has been very meaningful to me. And the stories of people on their self-care journeys are very meaningful to me as well, whether it's a success or a failure, right? Like,
Is it
I mean,
like
I've seen,
inspirational, like motivating, or is it more like informative, like a help, or both, or how do you kind of take
I
it?
think all of it, right? Like, I can take what I like and I can leave the rest, right? So, like,
Yeah.
an example, one of the leaders in my business, who I, know it had created a successful body partnership, was making lots of money, and burned themselves out in the process. And I took a look at that and said, no, that's not what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to build a business that's going to serve my well-being, because there's very few businesses out there that actually serve your well-being. So, like, I get the freedom to
Yeah.
create that. Um,
So that's boundaries. Talk about that idea, having and enforcing them.
yeah, it's hard. I think the more, like, you start to think, I don't know if you're like, I've had this long history of thinking things will take less time than they will, right? Like, I thought it would take me a year to produce the book, and it took like 2.5.
I'm in that with
Like,
my current book. It's like I'm 3 years in. I'm like, this might be
yeah,
a 5-year project.
yeah. I think that happens. So, for me, if I can stay focused on the things that are important to me, I do better. And so like keeping my blinders on to a degree, like, and it's weird, right? Like I don't have to reconcile it, but here I am telling you all about how listening to other people's experiences is important. And I think it's important to leave some of that, right? Like I don't need to get into the
Mm,
comparison game. I don't need to say to myself, well, this person made X dollars by X years or whatever.
hmm
Like, and at the end of the day, are dollars really what's the most important to me? And it's really not, right? Like, even though you hang out with people who are celebrating them enough and you start to think they are, like, I mean, when I look at it, like, honestly, like, my business, though I'm not making $1 million a year, my business is absolutely successful because I am growing to the glory of God. And I can help people love themselves better from anywhere at any time. I am geographically independent, right?
yeah.
And like, I mean, like, I am living into the bridge that I built for myself 10 years ago, like every day. Um,
Yeah,
it's,
that's it.
it's,
Well, yeah. I was just
it's
gonna say
important to remind myself.
yeah, I've been freelancing since I shut down Noodlehead, and it's like a constant tension of people like, you should hire someone and start a marketing company. They're like,
You're like,
no,
oh God, no.
I already went down that road. That's not what I want to do. And it's actually been interesting because most people would just go down that road and they would
Yeah,
build the company. And I'm going the other direction. And it's
yeah,
actually created
yeah,
some really unique opportunities and perspectives that would have never been possible without that hard no.
yeah,
I mean, I had a guy the other day. He texted me. It's nice that it's something like it's nice that you get to take off weekends because I don't work
yeah.
on the weekends. And
Take off. Who
but
even like,
I
yeah,
didn't used to. I worked every day and all the
yeah,
time. So
yeah.
but that was a choice I made, and I had to enforce it, right? So
Well, and I gotta say, like, watching you, I mean, like, I had a front row seat for your epiphany.
yeah,
I mean, I was in the room when you figured out, oh no, I created this company for all the wrong reasons.
yeah,
Like, this is a problem, right? Like, and it was catastrophic in so many ways. Like, I mean, but honestly, like, I mean, at the end of the day, any of the dreams I had for Noodlehead and it's like commercial success or whatever, like, takes such a backseat to that community we had. Like, just the way the four of us in particular, I think at the end, right? Like,
yeah.
we're able to just treat each other with dignity and respect and allowed each other to have different opinions and views and experiences. Like, it was it was beautiful. It was beautiful, and also I have come to define that period with this understanding that one of the earmarks of true community, like true, deep, meaningful community, is it's fleeting. Things change. Someone's got to leave. Something's got to change. It's not gonna. It just doesn't stay, right? And it's kind of heartbreaking and also beautiful at the same time because if it was always there, maybe we wouldn't even appreciate it.
Mm, yeah, that's a good point. The contrast between the two.
Mm. But I mean, those last months in particular, like, I mean, you were a sight to see, Jason. That was a tough period for you.
Yeah, it
You
was.
really went through the ringer. Um, and that'll cure some watching someone go through that will cure someone of the idea of going to start a company for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, when you came on board, it was like, okay, if we were to start a marketing company over again, what would it look like? And we changed it into that. But then I had to deal with the more root question, which is, if I could do anything vocationally, would this be what I do?
Right,
And the answer was no. And
right.
I knew to be fully committed, I had to be fully committed, and I wasn't. So um, that was the one of the aspects of it. I think for me was to say goodbye to something I loved.
Yeah, and what bravery, right? Because I mean, that community, I know you loved it as much as I did. I think we all did. That was a really
Yeah,
special thing, and especially going through that year together, right? Like, what a leap of faith, especially
yeah,
for like someone like Wayne, right?
yeah,
Okay, let's see how
yeah,
this goes, I guess.
yeah. I'll ride the roller coaster. And
Yeah, and I gotta
y'all gave me parting gifts that changed me, and
Well, and if you look at it, like we're all still kind of connected in one way or another, right? Like, I mean, Lynn did the graphic design for my book. Um, Wayne has been helping me build this website for Opals America. Like he and I have been in
Mhm.
contact recently.
Yeah.
He came to my last Clean Week self-care event.
Oh, wow. Cool.
His focus was eating more fruit.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
That's
that's neat.
neat. Yeah, I think it's kind of special that there was something real there, right? And because it's still there.
Yeah.
There's love. There's love
Yeah.
there.
So, and we all got springboarded, even though we said would probably happen. We didn't want to accept it.
Yeah, yeah, and I, and it certainly didn't. I didn't get didn't get off to where I ever would have imagined myself. And yet I am exactly where I'm meant to be, and I'm the happiest I've ever been. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like I would not want to go through it again, but I wouldn't not want to go through it.
Right. Like it was so foundational, so very foundational. Yeah.
Yeah. And there were a lot of other people that played their parts
Oh
in
my
that. Leaders
gosh.
Lyceum and Keith and
Absolutely.
Todd and
And
then
what was the
Sarah.
church that took us in when the
Oh,
mold problem?
Generations, James Rell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
James in particular. I
We got
remember
an
remember we had just made the decision not to talk about the
oh, the Sabbath
sabbatical
year.
year with anyone unless they like straight up asked us. And like the
Yeah.
next day you had lunch with him and he's like, "Now tell me what's going on."
But you were there too, right? Or was it just me? I can't remember.
I'm pretty sure it was just you for that
Oh,
one. I think
okay.
we talked to him later, but yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Maybe I was. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, I remember the story. I remember feeling like God was dancing around it.
Yeah. And that's yeah, that was a wild journey. Maybe we'll have to talk about that some more, but as a group. So,
Yeah.
but I think in a lot of ways, from there, and this is one of the this is an interesting thought. When the pandemic hit, I thought I was going to have to pivot,
Hmm.
but I realized that the Sabbath year had already prepared me for the pivot, and that was
More provision.
pretty neat. Like, yeah, it was just like, okay. And it took me a few months to realize it because I was like panicking a little bit.
Yeah.
So then I was like, wait a second. It's sort of the living the Sabbath life versus sort of this one-time thing. It's just living this way of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rest and
Yeah,
release.
it's hard. I think it's hard. It's very countercultural. Like I told you, I take the third week off,
Yeah.
from social media and stuff, but it was still a challenge for me to start to embrace the idea that sometimes I can make it 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And I do. Sometimes I
yeah.
do.
And I took that idea, it kind of manifests in different ways, but one of the ways it manifests in that similar way for me is at the end of the year, like around November, I'll do like a reflection of the year post on my blog,
Hmm.
and then I'll just stop posting on my website until
Hmm.
sometime in January. And it's just
Yeah.
like this break. And yeah.
And you can come back to it fresh and
Yeah.
enthusiastic.
It's actually energizing because then it
Yeah. You
refuels.
like want to share things all of a sudden. It doesn't feel like a burden, right? You're like,
Yeah.
oh, stuff to share
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
What other final words of wisdom do you have for us that you'd like to share that you didn't get a chance to yet?
Oh, I mean, I guess it's just a reiteration of everything I've been saying. Like, if I could talk to the person who's listening to us right now, I would want them to know that they are loved and they can trust themselves. And there is help if they're willing to ask for it. And all is well, and all will be well.
Cool. Well, if people want to visit your website or find you on social media, where do they do all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff?
so you can find me on potluckmama.com. I've got those months worth of meditations up there. I also have information about Potluck Fit Mama, which is the kind of health esteem partnership that I have built. And I most recently built a website for my husband. He's got opal fever and started cutting opals. And so opalsamerica.com if you want to go look at some pretty gemstones and ooh
And
and
is it
ah
just the
them.
stone, or is it like part of jewelry, or?
Just the stone. So it's just the
Wow.
cut stone, and you can put it into custom jewelry, or if you're a jeweler, you can buy them. But that's been fun to watch. Like
Yeah.
he, talk about like finding a calling like this. He's a bus driver, a school bus driver, and something he
Yeah.
never planned for his life, but he took on in 2020. He had a CDL. We figured if things get bad, they'll close the schools. He loves that job now. And then he got hooked on this guy in Australia who has this YouTube channel who like cuts opal, and he'll spend like an hour telling you exactly how he's doing it, and it'll put me
Wow.
to sleep in 5 minutes. But he's like obsessed. And
Yeah.
so in the spring, we got him a lapidary machine. That's the machine you use to cut
Okay.
gemstones,
Is it a
and he
big thing
started
or
cutting.
small? What's
It's probably about the size of like a keyboard, right?
okay.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and he loves it, and like it lights him up from the inside out. You know when you watch someone and they're just like lit up by what they're doing. It's been really
Yeah.
neat. And then for me, I mean, like I only ever knew enough about websites to be dangerous, right? Like I was constantly having to call one of the techs to fix something I broke.
Yeah.
So for me to build this website, I mean, I've had to rebuild it at least 3 times, right? Like bloated the site or this or that or the other. But and I've I had Wayne's help on that. It's been tremendous to be able to connect with him, and it was fun too, right? Like that first phone call with him about the project, it was just like going back to Noodlehead days. Like,
Yeah.
okay, so now what happens if we do this, and now what about like we just fell right back into our flow, which was really fun. But I'm proud of myself. I've been intellectually challenged by it, and yeah, I'm really proud of what I built. I think it's beautiful. I think it's as beautiful as Viv's gemstones are. So
Yeah.
he's got
Yeah.
his stones are his babies, and the website's my baby now. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. So what's the
yeah,
URL for that?
that's opalsamerica.com.
Okay, Opals America. And then you're on Facebook and Instagram. Your
Yeah, I'm
book's
on
on
Facebook.
Amazon.
Yeah, books on Amazon, and you can find a link to the book on Potluck Fit Mama as well. That's No Electronics, a potluck of poems, and that I'm also really proud of that. It's funny because you talk about why we wrote them. I don't know if you remember, but my thing when I wrote that was I want to create something that my kids can pass down that's a little piece of me. And
Yeah.
I said that, and of course in the back of my mind I'm also like, I'm gonna give them this, right?
Yeah.
Which I'm not.
Yeah.
And it's okay, because I really did achieve my goal. I have this little piece of myself
Yeah.
in that book, and I'm really proud of it. And I think there'll be another publication for me one day. It's just not time. But a lot of my heart and soul is in Potluck Fit Mama right now. So if you go to Facebook or Instagram, Potluck Fit Mama is where I am talking about all things self care, and
Okay.
that's all those departments, right?
Okay.
The whole self, the whole spirit,
Cool.
the whole
Who's
body.
if what's a challenge or a problem that someone might be having that you can help them solve?
Oh, there's a few things, right? So yeah, obviously all the self, if you don't love yourself, if you have insecurities around yourself, like I can build you up. I can help you learn to love yourself. I can help you see how beautiful you are. I can also I have a history of that people pleasing behavior, performing for other people, validating my worth by praise or achievements, and really kind of obsessing about other people and like how they're doing. All this stuff was very damaging to me, and so I take helping other people out of those places very seriously. So if you're someone who is worn out from worrying about other people, I can help you. I can help you there for sure. And you can
Yeah.
email me, potluckmama@gmail.com, and we can talk more.
Yeah. And I can attest to that because I went through the ringer, and then when Beth came around, she really did. You did provide a safe and loving place for me to work
Mm.
through and heal on some of the areas that were uniquely you were uniquely positioned to do so for me.
Well, it was a mutual thing. I when you asked me to do this, my first thought was I just remembered how many conversations we've had over the years, right? And I've always enjoyed my conversations with you, and I think that I've always felt this kinship to you in, I guess, in our willingness to love people.
Yeah.
I think that's really what it came down to, right? Like just to love people.
And to love beyond what most people would be willing to.
Yeah, I think so. There's an acceptance there, and I think everybody needs that. Like, there's so much criticism in the world. We like I said, like it's like a strength and a weakness thing, right? Like, just to accept that our strengths are also our weaknesses, and that we're human and
Yeah.
we can make mistakes and we can change our minds. Like, these are things that I feel like we're trained to think we have to get everything right. Like, right? Like, I mean, you're given a test and you're trying to get 100 points.
Yeah.
Like, and nobody ever says that failure is a success, and yet often it is, right? Like, look at Noodlehead. I mean, Noodlehead Marketing was a failure, and yet it was so important to our
Yeah.
lives, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing,
Mm.
is like having that groundedness to fail. And I remember that one time we did that island story where that lady, we talked, it was in the island story, the reef of failure, I think is what we were calling it at the time. And she just was like, no, it is not the reef
Oh,
of
I do
failure.
remember that. I do remember that.
And that's like, I see people that have a hard time sort of accepting that, but I sort of embrace failure, like, because
Right,
that's not where my identity comes from.
right.
Right. Yeah.
And honestly, willingness to accept failure in ourselves, grace, right? Grace
Yeah.
is a practice. And so if I can show myself grace, it's going to be so much easier for me to show others grace. And
Exactly.
that's what we
Yeah.
all need at the end of the day, right? Is for someone to say, it's okay. You're okay. You're
Yeah.
okay. You're loved.
Yeah. That scared kid inside of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Little Jason,
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
Beth.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Oh,
I
thanks for
appreciate it.
inviting me. I enjoyed chatting with you. It was good. Nice
Yeah,
to
it's good.
catch up.